We go. Ready? So we're going to do the screen sharing thing again. And we're going to get rolling. Okay, so I'm going to start off on a not strong note, which is I don't have a text. I don't have a biblical or rabbinic text for this, but I really loved Padme's addressing the Senate. I think these might have been deleted scenes, to be honest. Maybe someone can correct me. I'm pretty sure they're deleted scenes. But Padme warns everybody not to create this army because war could happen. And she says this decision could very well destroy the very foundation of our great republic. Don't do this disastrous decision. Vote down the security measure, which is nothing less than a declaration of war. I'm very fascinated by this. It's a very strong note, and I don't know of anything off the top of my head, unless somebody else does, about war, especially in the Bible, because there's a lot of war, especially in the Torah, but throughout. There's a lot of different wars, and it's sort of just war happens. And you also kind of see this in the Talmud, where they talk about whether going to more of a voluntary war versus a more obligatory war, but there's not really, this sort of, and maybe someone knows a text offhand about hand-wringing about going to war, but I just found that a very powerful statement, even if it might have just ended up in the deleted scenes. Okay, here's another one. Importance of a weapon. I don't have a good text off the bat for good stuff, but I really enjoyed this scene when Anakin loses his lightsaber. Obi-Wan says, "Here, next time, try not to lose it. Sorry, Master." Anakin tries to go for it, and Obi-Wan says, "A Jedi saber is his most precious possession." "Yes, Master. He must keep it with him all times." "I know, Master. This weapon is your life. I've heard this lesson before." So finally, Anakin gets it. There is, again, I know I'm starting to strike out, but don't worry. I'm not getting a third strike here, is that this is a really cool, first of all, it's a really fascinating scene, really gives you a good sense of not only who Obi-Wan and Anakin are, but more importantly, the relationship between the two of them. And so that's really cool, and it says a lot about Jedis and the relationship with their lightsaber, but I don't know if there's a good, I know we've talked, I mentioned before with weapons, there's an interesting Mishnah about in the 6th chapter of Shabbat, whether there is how weapons can be ornaments, but that's not the same as far as the relationship. There's in Judaism, they don't have the same relationship to a particular prized possession being a weapon as there is in Jedi. Okay. Having started off on a weak foot, don't worry, it gets better. Okay. It starts to get better with getting a drink. So while Obi-Wan and Anakin are chasing Zam Wesell after Zam Wesell's vessel has been affected, it's going down, Zam Wesell runs into a bar, if you remember. So the two of them go in, and then Obi-Wan says, "You're going to go this way," and Anakin says, "Where are you going, Master?" He says, "I'm going to get a drink. I'm in a bar. You do the work. I'm the master here." And that happens. So we get to talk about something I think I know a fair amount about in Jewish tradition, which is drinking. And so there's a really great line in Ecclesiastes, which is really fascinating and is easily something we can make an entire separate conversation out of, which is this line in Ecclesiastes. And I do have, if anybody's interested, an entire podcast episode about drinking in the book of Ecclesiastes. It's an entirely separate conversation or topic, but it's better to go to a house of mourning than to a drinking house, for that is the end of every man, and a living one should take it to heart. Now, this is fascinating. By the way, I'm just going to put my own spin on this, which is, I really think that what this verse is trying to say is, it's obvious that you're going to go to drinking houses, and that's normally the way that life works, is that you're going to go out drinking. That's life. But there's actually another reason that could potentially, sort of be better, that if you go to a mourning house, not that it's necessarily a comfort to the mourners, which is fascinating, but rather that it sort of contextualizes the finiteness of life, which is really fascinating. Whereas you don't necessarily have that same sense at a drinking house, but Not that a drinking house is necessarily morally bad. It's just you don't get this added benefit of contextualizing life and how it is. We can keep going on about drinking the book of Ecclesiastes, but it makes sense for the context. But don't worry, in the book of Ecclesiastes, drinking is actually a good thing. It's noted as a gift of God. That's a whole other topic, which I'm happy to share the link. Okay, there's, speaking of drinking houses, so this verse actually gets quoted in the Tosefta. For those less familiar with the Tosefta, it's kind of a companion to the Mishnah, and the Mishnah was redacted around the beginning of the 3rd century of the Common Era, and the Tosefta was roughly a little bit after that, but we'll still place in the first part of the 3rd century of the Common Era, and it's early rabbinic text about a variety of things. And we have this text here where a beit mishteh, a beit ha'avel, so if you have 2 houses that you go to, either a drinking house or a mourning house, beit ha'mishteh kodem lebeit ha'avel. So you should go to the drinking house first. But Rabbi Yishmael, he actually would go to the mourning house first because of specifically this verse that we just read. So that having been said, I mean, when you consider Anakin and Obi-Wan, they had no choice, right? They were in hot pursuit of Zam Wesell, and that's where they were. But, you know, if Obi-Wan's going to be there, get a drink. Makes sense. All right. Any questions so far? Anybody? I can't see all hands. Okay. I think we're good. Okay. Now we're going to move on. This is cute. While still in this Coruscanti bar, we have Elon. It's, you know, the subtlety of the naming is about the subtlety of James Bond movies. Elon Sleaze Bigano. And, you know, he says, want to buy some death sticks? And he says, you do not want to sell me death sticks. I don't want to sell you death sticks. You want to go home and rethink your life. I want to go home and rethink my life, right? It's cute. I don't have something here about Jedi mind tricks, but the idea of doing something that is, well, death sticks, but something that's bad for your health. Now, while it's, I'm just going to cheat on this one, which is, while I don't have an easy, quick, you know, they didn't talk about cigarettes in the Bible or Talmud, there definitely are some things that you really want to make you choose more lifeful decisions as opposed to more deathful decisions. And later on, in more 19th and 20th century context, the health concerns about cigarettes pop up more frequently. But as far as the more biblical rabbinic, not as much. Okay. Unless someone has something that they know of off top, but I'm going to leave it with that. Okay. Defending one's life. So this is something I know I brought up a little bit in episode 4, in the A New Hope episode. And here we have the GIF of Obi-Wan sensing the Zam Wesell, pulling the pistol on him, and then he's able to draw his lightsaber and slice off part of her arm. So this is, we have something here from, this is just, yeah. Then we have something here from the Talmud, from the Babylonian Talmud in Sanhedrin, and the Babylonian Talmud, for those less familiar, it includes not only early rabbinic conversations from the first couple of centuries of the Common Era, but even from the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and potentially 6th century. And this text here is an earlier text. It's purported to be a Baraita. It's a Tannaitic text, so from the first roughly couple of centuries of the Common Era. And they said, and they are actually grabbing something from Exodus if someone comes into your house to burgle you. So if there shall not be bloodshed on his account, if there's a burglar, the sun is risen upon him, etc. Okay. And the rabbis say, did the sun rise only upon him? Rather, if the matter is clear to you as the sun, you can kill him. But if you're not sure, don't kill him. Basically, the idea is you do have an ability for self-defense, but also not necessarily to kill him. Now, it's interesting, by the way, if we want to contrast this scene with Obi-Wan drawing his lightsaber versus in A New Hope drawing his lightsaber, both of them have the same result, right? He's at a bar, and both of them, he draws his lightsaber, and both of them, he slices off an arm, right? Okay. The difference, of course, and in both situations, someone's trying to kill. The difference is in A New Hope, they're trying to kill Luke, and here Zam Wessel's trying to kill Obi-Wan. In either situation, actually, in A New Hope, I talked about how he's basically defending Luke, and it's better that he didn't kill this person. Here, I mean, he probably had license to kill Zam Wessel, but ideally, it's better to stop someone than necessarily to kill them. Of course, on top of everything, this is really the beginning of a mystery, right? This is part of why I really enjoy Attack of the Clones. It's really a great, like a film noir murder mystery, right? And this is really the beginning. And you really want to know who sent Zam Wessel, who sent you. And then, of course, we get into this really great murder mystery. And then Zam Wessel unfortunately dies because Jango Fett shoots Kamino Dart. All right. Okay. I have another one I struck out on. I'm sure there's a lot of good stuff about respecting one's teachers. There's Aharon, you're going to love this one. We have an Anakin rant. And Anakin says, don't get me wrong, whatever. It's a bunch of whining. Oh, Obi-Wan doesn't, da-da-da. That must be frustrating. Like, Padme is super nice. That must be frustrating. She's listening to this, like, basically teenager whine. And he's, it's worse. He's overcritical. He never listens. It's not fair. Okay. A lot of whining. There's a lot of texts. I probably should have just selected one. But there's an idea of giving kavod, of giving honor to one's teacher, to one's master in Talmud, in rabbinic literature. It's all over. It's pretty permeating, and I should have just grabbed one, just dropped it in. And I probably will go after this session and just pluck one out and pop it in. But there's definitely an idea about that. You know what I will say, sometimes it appears, I'm just going to use one example, even though Passover was a couple months ago, was the idea of having, someone chat. The idea, Edie, at least sitting in the dust of a master's feet. Yep, thank you, Edie. And having at the Passover Seder that you're normally not supposed to lean in front of your master, right? But you can get special permission at the Passover Seder to get permission that you can lean in front of them at the Passover Seder. So there are certain pieces of etiquette with regards to according one's teacher, one's master honor, and it could also be the way you address them and so forth. But yes, as Edie astutely points out in the chat, not to whine about them. So there's a lot of, look, Anakin is being clearly, on the one hand, he's a teenager, he's exceedingly frustrated, but at the same time, he's clearly not giving Obi-Wan the honor that he deserves. Okay.
Okay, I have to interject. When you put it that way, we could also use Ben Sorer. The stubborn and recalcitrant son, because he's speaking ill of his teacher, right?
Well, the Ben Sorer is more towards the parents, right?
Yeah, but he's standing in for a parent. Obi-Wan is.
Yeah.
He's in loco parentis.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking about the Padawan master relationship. They're taken away from their homes. They have no real families.
Well, he says he's the closest thing he has to a father in the movie. He does make that comment. So yeah.
Right.
And he wasn't totally stubborn. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just say also with Anakin, I think it's a little different too, because usually the Padawans are at the temple. So there's no one Jedi that acts kind of like their father, but because they wouldn't take Anakin for training, and because Qui-Gon died so quickly, Obi-Wan really does spend way more time with him from the time they take him on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. On top of, Anakin has no father, according to Shmi. Right? Shmi says, he just happened. And the Phantom Menace. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good call. Love. Okay, this is an interesting one. In there is Aharon did Aharon leave? Oh, Aharon already left. Okay. Are you allowed to love? I thought that was forbidden for a Jedi, right? They're on Naboo. And he says, attachment is forbidden. Possession is forbidden. Compassion, which I would define as unconditional love, is central to a Jedi's life. So you might say we're encouraged to love. Okay, so this is clever, Anakin. So it's interesting when you want to talk about love or unconditional love. I went to V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha in Leviticus 19, which is you should love your fellows yourself. It's great. By the way, I picked out one here. This verse gets used over a dozen times in the Babylonian Talmud, which is really fascinating, or at least over 10 times, which is really fascinating. And here's one that I think is really fascinating in Kedushin. So this is also Babylonian Talmud. And here we have Rav Yehuda quotes Rav. So they're both 3rd century rabbis. Rav Yehuda is the student of Rav, and he says, Asar la'adam she'kadesh es ha'isha ashirena. It's forbidden for a man to betroth the woman until he sees her shema yira ba'ad davar maguna v'tikana alav, and that he sees something repulsive in her and she's repugnant to him. Okay, so he at least needs to see her. And then it says V'rachmana Amar, and like basically God or the merciful one says V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, which is nice. It's a nice way to pull this in of like, oh, you should love your fellow as your neighbor, or at least make sure your wife's not ugly, you know. Interesting. But so I went more towards I tied in both the Leviticus, which is just loving other people, that sort of unconditional love, but then the Rav Yehuda quoting Rav piece, that could also tie into sort of the more romantic love that Anakin's talking about. So I'm just going to go on a tangent, which really doesn't have to be, which is more in the Star Wars universe, which is really fascinating, which is, for anybody who's seen Star Wars, The Clone Wars, you probably are aware that that there had been some sort of relationship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Duchess Satine. I don't know if anybody has seen Star Wars: The Clone Wars here, but there's clearly been some sort of previous relationship, and you're left wondering what happened. One of the things that's been interesting in recent times, and I know Vera has read this book, and Master and Apprentice, which you see this notion that technically it's kind of sketchy, that Jedi are they're not like Catholic priests where they have to be celibate, but they still have to accord to what Anakin just said, which is attachment is forbidden, possession is forbidden, but you're not like disconnected from the world. Vera, I know you read that book. Did I communicate that?
Yeah, that seems to be sort of the thrust, right, of, the relationships in that book.
Right. And now I don't know how much what that book was trying to do was trying to retcon everything in the, like this, and also stuff in the Clone Wars, and just trying to retcon everything around. But it works, right? Yeah? Okay, cool. So that's just a funny little thing about the Jedi Order, that there's a little wiggle room. The Jedi can still have physical relations even if they can't marry or have attachments or possessions, whatever. Okay.
So can I make one comment about that?
Go for it.
I think it's really interesting that the text that you chose, because I feel like the Gemara that you chose is specifically kind of doing with the Leviticus verse, like what Anakin is doing with like turning this like love and compassion towards people into like something having to do with like a specific romantic love. Like it's that same kind of twist. Because I feel like Anakin also like, he knows that that's not really what he's supposed to be doing, like he's like, oh, but this kind of love, we can make it work, it works with the ideals here. So I feel like these texts are doing that same thing, which I think is very interesting.
Right, you're totally right. That Anakin, you definitely get a feel that Anakin's dealing with, just like the rabbis are doing, a particular text that they hold really important, which is like the Jedi Order and the rules, and yet he's giving his spin on it, right? For sure. All right. Okay, cloning. We get a little Lama Sue action here. So first of all, I love this, all the Camino and stuff, because it's right in the thick of the entire murder mystery stuff. And Lama Sue says, apart from his pay, which is considerable, Fed demanded only one thing: an unaltered clone for himself. Curious, isn't it? Unaltered. Pure genetic replication. No tampering with the structure to make it more docile, and no growth acceleration. So the idea of cloning is something that we kind of see. It's really unclear exactly what to make of it in the Babylonian Talmud, but in Sanhedrin 65b, we have it here. Rava created a man and sent this creation before Rabbi Zera. And Rabbi Zera would speak to him, but he would not reply. And he said to him, you were created by one of the members of the group, return to your dust. And this, by the way, is ultimately sort of the seed for what eventually happens with the Golem of Prague. So whatever, it's yeah, sort of the origins, like the kernel of that story. But we have something where he created something out of whatever. It's not exactly a clone exactly, but it's sort of, I don't know, not necessarily creating something out of nothing, but vaguely. We also have this other thing, which is not a person, but Rav Chanina and Rav Oshaya would sit every Shabbat Eve and engage in the Sefer Yitzir, and a third-born calf, an Igla Tilta, would be created for them, and they would eat it out of Kavod Shabbat. So this, just by the way, a fun fact, I really am curious to look all throughout the Babylonian Talmud where this Igla Tilta appears, but I know one other place that it appears is in Megillah 7b, which is something that someone would send to Rav Oshaya. They would send to him this Igla Tilta. So it was something that Rav Oshaya really enjoyed. It was a really pleasurable delight that he would have in Shabbat, he would have it in Purim. So he was big into that. So there are these things. I was almost tempted to go in the direction of talking about being fruitful and multiplying and sort of that. It's not exactly the same, but for presumably what Jango Fett wants to do is have some sort of offspring. And even though he himself is not engaging in the normal reproductive act, he's engaging in this reproductive act, which is literally just copying himself into this clone for himself, which I could have gone in that direction, talking about how there is this sort of prerogative to not just, whatever, this sense of like procreating, as it were. Of course, there's also, I could have brought in about Ben Azai, where it talks about Ben Azai, how he never married, he never had kids, and the rabbi said it's fine because basically you're married to Torah, which is an interesting sort of like, oh, but it's okay for you because you had that. I didn't pop that in, but that's an interesting other direction someone could take this, of talking about that. Cool. Any questions so far? Good? All right. Okay, nightmares. All right, we go in a million different directions with dreams, and I'll tell you why. Because dreams are something that, appear in the Bible. They appear especially in the book of Genesis, and then, especially Exodus with Joseph, and then he becomes the master dream interpreter, the Tzafnas Paneach. He's the man, and he does a lot of stuff with dreams, okay? He is the dreams master par excellence, no question about it in the Bible. And that's one direction, and then there's this entire section in the Babylonian Talmud in Brachot that just dreams. It's so much stuff, and we'll get to it. I picked out one piece of that entire discussion about dreams, but for here we have the nightmares. Anakin's he's got some sort of nightmares. No, mom, don't no. And Anakin is very distraught about this. Padme comes into the balcony. Don't go. Whatever. I don't want to serve you. Blah 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 blah. Jedi don't have nightmares. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know if that's something that Anakin just tells Padme, like, oh, it's not really a thing. Like, get away from me. It's okay. Or maybe that's really a thing. Like, Jedi are either not supposed to have nightmares, or what the deal is with that. I don't know how true that is, right? I don't know if that's a normative statement that Jedi don't have nightmares, or maybe that's more of something like, that's just something he's telling her. It's just a line. I don't know. I really don't know what to do with that. In any event, he says, I saw my mother. I saw her as clearly as I see you now. She's suffering. She's in pain. Okay. And we have, you know what? I'm going to go in a different direction, which is, so, I'm going to, I'll say this. So we'll do this text, and there's another text I didn't include here, but I'll mention also, which is here we have Rav Huna bar Ami says, Rabbi Padat says, Rabbi Yochanan says, Hara chalom v'nafsho aguma, so one who sees a dream and they're bothered by this, Yelech v'if terenu b'ifnei shlosha, you should go and have it interpreted in front of 3. So whatever, the Talmud says, wait, what do you mean, if terenu, interpreted, Bahama Rav Chista. I love this line. This is a great line that you can use like really anywhere, any context, any occasion, but a dream and not interpreted is like a letter not read. So I love this Rav Chista line. This is like solid stuff, right? A letter, like when you have a letter sent to you, there's a message inside. Now, it could be junk mail, it could be a bill, but it could also be like a thank you note or a birthday card. It doesn't always have to be bad. There's a message for you. There's communication that is, designated for you as the end recipient. But, so I love that. But bringing it back to the nightmare piece, but just like you could have junk mail, you could have fraudulent mail, that could be like some bad stuff, or just a bill, just normal stuff, still meant for you, just like this nightmare, right? One other thing that it does, I love this line. It's a few pages later in Brachot, maybe 60a, could be 50, it could also be 57a, somewhere around there. Anyways, it's a few pages later in Brachot where it talks about certain things that are a 60th of some other special thing. So, for instance, it talks about how fire is 1/60th of Gehenom, or that honey is 1/60th of Man, or Shabbat is 1/60th of the world to come. But it also talks about how dreams are a 60th of prophecy. And I think that's an interesting connection here, where Anakin really is experiencing his nightmare almost, there is a prophecy piece to it because she's clearly suffering, right? And she whether that's happening at the moment or will happen, it's definitely something that he is receiving, right? It's a letter that's being sent to him and he's receiving that. So that's another text that could be thrown into your relationship. Thoughts, questions, comments, queries, dreams, nightmares?
I definitely think that the prophetic way is a great way to go with it, because it really is what it is about. He's not having the nightmares based just out of, things that he's worried about or concerns he's having, but because his, being opened up more to the force, he's having these prophetic dreams. And we see that multiple times throughout the series. So I like going with some of the prophetic interpretation there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, so guess what, folks? We're almost to the 40-minute mark, and at this point, I want to acknowledge Daryl and Stephanie, because the first week we did this, and we ran out of time at 40 minutes. But thanks to their generosity, they're supporting me, throwing a little extra money to make this more than just 40 minutes. So thank you, Daryl and Stephanie. I appreciate it. All right, just wanted to give that acknowledgement. Okay, giving up. So Anakin and Padme go out to Tatooine. They meet Klieg Lars, and Klieg says, "This is not the way I wanted to meet you, son. This is not how your mother and I planned it. I don't want to give up on her, but she's been gone a month. There's little hope she's lasted this long," right? And if anybody remembers this scene, he's pulling up. He's lost part of a leg. He's in a wheelchair. He went out on a hunting party, and so many people did not come back, right? These people, the Tusken Raiders are tough folks, are tough critters. So Owen says, "Where are you going?" "To find my mother." "No, Annie, she's dead, son, accept it. I can feel her pain and I will find her. I know she's alive. I have a special set of skills," right? So, all right. So I don't have a lot for this right now. I do have this quote from Rava in Gittin 28a, also from the Babylonian Talmud. Rava, we saw Rava earlier, right? He created this Gavra, he created this golem. Rava, just for some context, so he lived in the early 4th century, but he's also, I would position him as the greatest Amora of the Talmud. So he's really one of the most significant figures, certainly intellectually, and also his, basically his intellectual fingerprints are all over the Talmud. he's really, really, really deeply significant. But anyway, so he says one thing here, Gittin 28a, which is he's talking about interpreting a certain Mishnah. That's not the important part. What I do want to focus in the Hebrew is the last three words. So, whatever. So, Shirov Gosin Lamita. Basically, that most people, as they're getting ready to die, it's gonna take them more. I think they're waiting for 3 days. It's some limited amount of time, and basically, the idea is someone's going to die. They're going to die. They only have a few amount of days. Ultimately, later on in the Shulchan Aruch, it talks about if you've heard someone is a goses, that they're dying, that you can give them a few days, and that's kind of it. I could have probably thrown in something here about the idea of geyush. There's an idea of giving up, right? After some point, usually it's talking about more of objects, not necessarily people, but after some point in time, you just got to accept that you're not getting that donkey back, or that whatever it is, it's been over a month or whatever it is, you just got to give up and move on. So that's a similar Talmudic concept, not a biblical one. Okay. Edie, you'll like this. So death is a little bit more on my mind, that previous one, but here we have Anakin. By the way, I before we get to this, I do love this scene. I don't know what anybody else says. When Anakin zooms off and he starts talking to the Jawas and these people and that people, and he's flying around on a scooter, and we have Duel of the Fates playing, which is, potentially the best Star Wars song ever. And it's just a lot of energy, and it's kind of Sithy. Oh, it's just so great. And then eventually he finds his mom. And I'm starting to get goosebumps, but the real goosebumps happen in the next one. But so Anakin says, Mom, so Annie, is it you? I'm here, Mom. You're safe. Hang on. I'm going to get you out of here. I'm so glad to see you, Annie. Now I am complete. Just stay with me, Mom. I'm going to make you well again. Everything's going to be fine. You look so handsome, my son, my grown-up son. I'm so proud of you, Annie. So proud. I miss you so much. I love. And she passed away. This is a text I thought would be relevant. I really wanted to get something that I know that I've seen in later halacha, later Jewish law in the Shulchan Aruch, about how you, basically how you are with someone as they're dying and all these things. But this is a close one, which is also from a Baraita, an early rabbinic text, also Nedarim 40a is also Babylonian Talmud. So this is, again, maybe turn of the 3rd century, maybe late 2nd century text. One who enters to visit a sick person may neither sit on the bed, nor on a bench, nor on a chair, rather wraps himself and sits on the ground, because the divine presence is resting above the bed of the sick person. As it is stated, the Lord will support him upon the bed of suffering. And the scene is Anakin holding his mom, right? He's cradling her. So he's not standing above her. He's not doing any of these things. He's with her, sort of being present for her. So I found that fascinating. Okay, any thoughts, comments, questions? We could talk about other things. Edie knows this, but it's been on my mind recently when people die. So there's different Jewish actions of mourning that you're supposed to, someone dies, you're supposed to stand up, there's a blessing you say, you rip your clothes, all these things, but obviously Anakin's not Jewish. Okay, what I mentioned before earlier, getting all these goosebumps, Duel of the Fates is going, and you got all this action. We have this quiet, basically a somber, quiet moment with Anakin and Shmi, and then she dies, and then I just love this, this next, the music totally changes, and then we have this, I threw in a GIF here of Anakin just going on a rampage. He pulls out of the tent, lights up a lightsaber, he quickly kills 2 Tusken Raiders, and then he just takes out the rest of the camp. Which he later then tells Padme, I killed them all, women, children, all of them. So thank you so much, Vera, for connecting this. Thank you, Vera. Where And by the way, I just have to say, as a fan of Attack of the Clones, like I was like, why that scene could have gone on for like I want more of that scene, the music, the passion, like the energy. Oh, I mean, they put in more bad dialogue, but they couldn't put in more energy. Oh, it was so frustrating. Anyways, we have this from the 15th chapter of 1 Samuel, where Samuel said to Saul, I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. Therefore, listen to the Lord's command. Thus said the Lord of hosts, I am exacting the penalty for what Amalek did to Israel for the assault he made upon them on the road on their way up from Egypt. Now go attack Amalek and prescribe all that belongs to him. Spare no one, but kill all like men, women, infants, sucklings, oxen, sheep, camels, and or donkeys, asses, what do you want to call them? Of course, there also appears in the Torah, but this is just a really explicit, like just everything, like kill them all, kill just every living being, just everything, just a total slaughter, annihilation. And as Vera pointed out to me, thank you, Vera, which is that we do see Anakin, and he is so distraught, like you can tell he's had a touch of the dark side to him, and he's really just gone off. And this is really, I mean, it's one thing for like a retributive killing to exact some measure of justice, but the little ones, the women, like that's tough. That is really tough. It has definitely a questionable moral valence for sure for Anakin. It's definitely not the Jedi way. Let me put it that way. It is, you really get a sense, it is so not, like that is the moral valence. Let me put it that way. That is the moral valence. It is negative because that's not Jedi-ish. But on the other hand, on his road, his path to becoming Darth Vader, it's really intriguing story-wise, right? Like I mentioned, you have Duel of the Fates, so you get some Sithness. You can tell he's enraged. It's like the, hate leads to all these different things, fear leads, whatever. He's going to the dark side. We all know it, okay? We know where that's heading. It's nevertheless exciting. But same, which is funny, I'm just going to point out the opposite, which is in the Samuel thing. What eventually happens to Saul? He does spare some things, and that's a problem ultimately, right? That's Saul's sin, is that he didn't go for a total annihilation, right? That's it's the opposite of Anakin. Okay?
Yeah, but he wasn't.
Yeah.
Saul had ulterior motives in that which he preserved too. I mean, Anakin was just like, I'm done with these folks. They need to just be gone.
Right.
Or Saul was perhaps looking for a different angle.
Yeah.
A different motivation.
It's true. But both
Despite
of them,
the fact he had permission.
right. He had permission. He had a charge to do this, and yet he didn't. And Anakin didn't, and yet he did. Like they both. It's interesting to look at the similarities and of course the dissimilarities. Yeah. All right. So going to a stadium, we have Petronaki Arena, right? The arena in Geonosis, and we have this is where the movie gets good. Here on out, I mean, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. It was good, now it gets great. And this is why, from here on out, the rest of the movie shows why it's one of the best Star Wars movies ever. Sorry, it's a really unpopular thought, but anyways, I put it out there. So with Stadia, whether you want to call them Stadia or stadiums, I don't know, but with them going into a stadium, that's like the least controversial way of saying stadium, we have the rabbis were not fond of this, the early rabbis. So the later rabbis were living mostly in Persia. They were not living within a sort of a Greco-Roman context, but the earlier rabbis were. And so they very much had this around them. They had like Greco-Roman stadiums or stadia to go to. They're not fond of it. They didn't think it was a worthwhile way of spending one's time or being around certain people. So we have also Babylonian Talmud, and again, another early rabbinic text, the Baraita, in Avodah Zarah 18b, that the sages taught. Does somebody else want to read, by the way? I'm okay reading, but I wanted to give, we're good? Okay, awesome. All right, so the sages taught, one who goes to a stadium or to a camp of besiegers, and he sees there diviners, those who cast spells, Bukion, Mukion, Mulion, Lulian, Buluran, Sguluran. This is the seat of the scornful. It's the Moshav Leitzim in Hebrew, which is from the very first set of Psalms. And with regard to such, the verse applies, happy is the man that does not walk. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach, Moshav Leitzim. So that's one of the things in the very first Psalm. You learn from here that these matters bring a person to dereliction. That's a really cool. Mafin et haram lidei bitul Torah, that you sort of nullify or you just sort of let Torah alone. So basically, in this rabbinic text, the rabbis are saying that you're abandoning Torah, right? These places are just such a different, it's not just like what's going on there, but also, I mean, part of it is what's going on there, who else is there, and really it's not good. Now, of course, what exactly is going on? So like diviners are like not, like that goes against the Torah. I don't know what all these different clowns are. I don't know what's going on with that. But there's more. Wait, there's more. So we have two more that I'm going to bring in here, which is, oh, that's going to be it for. One is permitted to go to stadiums because he can scream and save the life of a Jew who would otherwise be killed there. Is permitted to go to camp seizures because of public welfare. Town, provided that he is not counted as one of them. Okay, great. And then a totally different one in Avodah Zarah 18b, it is taught one may not go to stadiums because they are Moshe Avleitzim. Okay, but Rabbi Natan permitted because of two reasons. One is he can scream and save the life of someone, and because he can provide testimony that a certain woman's husband died. He can provide testimony. Okay, it's interesting because you have these like, they're like, oh, well, there's no good reason, but maybe. Oh, wait a second, this can kind of count. I don't know. It's clearly like, I don't know the full social context of what was going on back then, but clearly the rabbis were deeply uncomfortable with, certainly at least the rabbinic class, the rabbinic elite, going to these stadiums or whatever cultural things were going on. But clearly people were, like some Jews were going to them, but the rabbis were not fond of this, clearly.
Well, if they were
Yeah.
the more Greek side of it, they weren't exactly overdressed. So it was a bunch of immodest men running around naked.
Yeah.
And then there's that whole you're not sitting and studying.
You're not sitting, right. There's a not sitting and studying. Right.
You're not learning.
Yeah,
You're just
and I once read a book about what went on in the Roman Colosseums and the such, and how they
Yeah.
train animals to kill people. And I honestly couldn't really eat much for 3 days afterwards. It's like, it was horrible.
Wow.
So like, I can't imagine any Jewish person would
Yeah.
want to be there.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of what we saw in Rabbi Natan's comment in 18b, where he talks about like, well, if you see someone dies, at least you can say to the, you know, their wife can remarry, right? There's this like just open acknowledgement, like people die. It's not pleasant, and it's not also. And going back, we don't know. Oh, can you do like circling and stuff? Is that something? Ooh, yeah. But like, I don't know what these people are, right? These Mukion, Mulion, Lulion, whatever. There's some weird stuff going on, obviously. But going back to what Edie said, yeah, I mean, when they study, it's a very oral, like it's an oral activity. Like you're talking, you're speaking, you're listening, right? They weren't sitting in front of text, but they were talking. And yeah, they definitely prioritize being engaged in Torah conversation. But here, these were, I like what Allison had to point out, which is that it's not just simply what we see in like Gladiator with a lion. Like there's all sorts of other more, I don't know, dangerous shenanigans going on, right? So, yeah.
Could that also just be as simple as mixing with pagans that was always kind of, I mean, that's where a lot of the laws come from is, oh, the pagans and the non-believers do that, so we don't. And so even it could be just as simple as that, because of course they were slaughtering animals for literally no reason whatsoever, and all kinds of craziness, which goes against most of the laws.
Right, and notice where those last set of texts were all from, which is from the Tractate of Avodah Zarah, which is foreign worship, right? It's really what that entire tractate is about, is trying to separate between the actions of the Gentiles, or at least the problematic actions of the Gentiles, things that have a more idolatrous nature to them, and things that are okay. And I think that's important to think about that that textual context also. Yeah. Any other, while we were talking about this, any other things pop up from Attack of the Clones that anybody has in mind? I'll tell you one thing that was on my mind, which it's not a big thing, but it was shortcuts. So early on Coruscant, when Anakin is like piloting the thing and he takes a shortcut, and Obi-Wan's like, "Where are you going?" Like, Sam Wessel went that way. And he says, "Oh, I'm taking a shortcut." I think there's some interesting things in the Talmud about shortcuts. Nothing like major, but I think there could be some interesting text around taking shortcuts. Anybody else have stuff that I think maybe I missed? Pretty happy. I think it's I think people should give Attack of the Clones another watch. Of course, if anybody's interested, I have my own aggressive edit, and so I don't have those horrible dialogues in Naboo, which are I don't know. It's like, you know, scratching a chalkboard. It's like, who needs this? So the rest
Definitely
of it
recommend the edit. Yeah, it helps, especially if you're just trying to do like a wash through. We're just trying to watch all of it and kind of move forward. It's a nice way to condense it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Daryl. Okay.
People who need all that dialogue are the people who, I actually had a friend when these all first came out. She had seen Phantom Menace, and she was like, "Oh, are you guys going to go see, you know, the next one?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know, whatever." You know, like, obviously we know the story, and you know, Anakin's going to end up with Padme, and she was shocked. She was like, "What do you mean? What? He's a kid." And I said, "Okay, hold up. Have you seen the originals?" And so, like, you need that dialogue for the people who, you know, maybe like they didn't care about the movies, and then they married somebody who, you know, was like all gung ho Star Wars, and they were just like, "What do you mean this guy's ending up with her?"
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Like I said, I'm pretty sure I heard someone say that George Lucas modeled it after like the 1930s, like a certain style. It was like a very formal style, and it was emulating of that. It wasn't just that George Lucas is a terrible director, although it could be. Allison, do you have something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, going back to the whole scene with the Tusken Raiders, like, I thought it was interesting how you put in about, you know, killing off all of Amalek there, because the way Klieg describes them, they said, you know, he tells Anakin they're, you know, animals, they're less than human. So maybe Anakin already had the seed planted in him that's okay to go ahead and just kill them off then. And because of, you know, like I say, my 3 little clones of myself that I have, the Lo Si Cone song always goes through my head too. So just not taking the revenge after them.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, not taking revenge. That's good. Yeah, you're right. Not taking revenge. That's a good one to throw in there. Thank you, Allison. All right, so does anybody have anything else? Are we ready to close up? So we're doing a lot of Anakin talking and Padme. So next week, as a special for Father's Day, we're going to be discussing the most famous father in Star Wars, right? How he became a father. So, yep. What is Darth Vader translates as something father, right? Does anybody know?
Yeah, it's just Dark Father.
Dark Father, that's what it is.
Wasn't terribly innovative.
Right. No one knew who he was the father of for the first couple of movies, but he is the Dark Father, the Darth Vader. So,
Well, it's also, I forget now, like, because it became super, you know, famous when they said in Pitch Perfect. But the VADER is more like, it's not German, it's like Swiss German or something. So that kind of threw people for a bit, because Vater in German has a T. And so I think that kind of possibly there's some people who are, maybe he means this, but maybe he doesn't. And then, you know, it's not pronounced Vater, it's Vader.
right.
Sounds a little different.
Yeah. But I'm willing for, you know, corniness reasons for Father's Day to call it, you know, we're talking about the Dark Father.
Do you want to do
both
it
his
next
creation and the creation of him as a father.
Yeah, there you go. But you don't want to postpone it since it's your day, you know, because we postponed the Mother's Day one.
We did postpone the Mother's Day. I think fathers will be okay with this, right? All right. Cool. Well, everybody, thank you so much. If you have any questions, suggestions, comments, or like Vera, if you have texts you want to suggest for Revenge of the Sith, I'm all for those. So thank you everybody so much again, and may the Force be with you. All right.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Good night, Sith.
May the Force be with you.
Yes, may the Force be with you. Thank you. All
May
right.
the Force be with you, Skywalker.
Yep. All right.